Hi guys, I'm Mike Taylor. I'm a neurologist at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we're here at the International Pediatric Stroke Congress in Toronto. And I just wanted to talk to AVM Alliance a little bit about a project that we've been doing at Cincinnati that I think really is impactful and hopefully will do some good for kids with AVM as we go forward. So what we did is we looked at all of our inpatient rehabilitation patients. That means we selected the sickest of the sick, of patients who came in with cerebrovascular disorders. And that includes our AVMs, that includes stroke patients, that includes a couple of other diseases as well. And we looked at what happens to them when you do a structured assessment of their educational needs and what their risks are going to look like. And I shouldn't be the one talking about this because Debbie South, who does all the work for us as a school liaison, is the person who really should take credit for all this work and has done just this incredible stuff. So what this is it's a structured assessment, and you can see some of the details of it on the screen here. It might be a little bit too small to read. But what it looks at is the risk that a patient may have before they even get a stroke in the first place, looking at different risks to their education, and then adds the conferred risk of getting a stroke on top of that, and how that impacts the family and how their ability to do the educational intervention and return to school is impacted by the lesion itself. It then looks at that risk and assigns it into a tier. And so over on the right here, we've got these different tiers of service. And this is exactly how our school liaison service works, where patients who are in the lowest tier, the innermost circle here, are the patients who get a little bit of reassurance and some redirection, maybe some educational materials, but don't necessarily get intervention from the school liaison, and then it walks its way out. So you can imagine in patients after AVM, they're going to be in that higher risk category. And so what we wanted to do was actually look at that and look at the ways in which those risks are seen in this population and give a little bit of numbers to that. I think there's a couple of really key points that we found. In this population, now this is a small slice. This isn't everybody who comes to the hospital. 74% of our kids who were admitted for a vascular diagnosis to the rehab unit already had school problems before the stroke even happened. Now, some of those kids were AVM kids that had symptoms beforehand. Some of those kids were kids who had autism and other diseases that also got complicated by a new disease. But they had a lot of risk to start with. So if 3 out of 4 kids already had problems, getting a stroke on top of that was certainly not going to make it easier to go back to school. So then we thought about, well, when we have that risk at the beginning, how does that confer additional risk when they get the stroke? And so we had that structured assessment, that structured interview that Debbie did with all these kids. And we found that before the stroke even happened, 50% of the time kids were in that moderate tier, that E2, if you remember the bubble diagram, the kind of second most outer circle. But then after the stroke, that group moves up into 60% in the high risk category, with almost everybody else in the moderate risk. So think about that again. We had 74% of the population that had some school problem before, and now we've added on top of it a stroke, and that puts almost everybody into that highest risk category, both the moderate and the high risk group. Now, this service isn't just for when you're in the hospital. This service is the beginning of a conversation that goes on for a long time. Again, a lot of kudos to Debbie here. 9+ months that she spends with these families on average, helping with getting kids back to school, helping with phone calls, helping with reaching out to guidance counselors, helping with talking to the school about the interventions and the things that kids need, writing up seizure action plans, writing up school letters to help with what to do if a stroke happens in the classroom, so that sort of service is able to help make it safer for that kid to be back in the school environment, and frankly reassure the school that that kid is safe to be in that environment, because I'm sure some of your families have had the same thing where they were told, stay out until you're better and then come back. Well, it doesn't work that way. And a disease that takes multiple years to fix, we got to get these kids back sooner. So the last thing I want to really highlight here are that it doesn't matter how old you are. We've got our primary school, our middle school, and our secondary school or high school kids, and think of this as a stoplight, right? Red is the highest risk category, yellow is the middle, and only one kid in this population was in the low risk group. And so it didn't matter what age you were going to be at risk. And here's the other kicker, and this is the real kicker for all the doctors who are here, is that it doesn't matter how severely that kid is going to be affected. They may end up normal by 3 months after their stroke. they may end up with mild deficits, maybe a little bit of difficulty with a hand or a little bit of difficulty with language production. But even in that group, half of the time they're going to be in the highest risk category, half the time they're going to be in the moderate risk category. And that goes up as you get in higher severities. So here's the key here, is that there aren't enough people like Debbie. There aren't enough people that do the work of helping make sure that kids are getting back to school. And we need 10 of her and probably 10 of everybody like her. But right now, you can't bill for that service. Now, for families that are paying the bills, I understand that's a good thing. The hospital gives you something for free, that's good. But for us, that is a negative pressure against having that person on staff in the first place. We need to have people whose jobs are paid for by the things that we do. And so to a degree, it's actually very beneficial to us to have a service that we can send a bill to Medicaid or to your insurance so that we can actually employ somebody to do the job to help your kid. And so that's the thing that we have to think about, is how do we define the true endpoints to make this good, to make this useful, to make this countable, to make this reproducible so that my hospital can do it, but then the hospital down the street can do it too. And so that it's not just us, and this is not a pitch to come to Cincinnati, this is a pitch for every hospital to do this better, to think about how we can be doing this for your children so that you can have better success and better return. Because if we can look at this and say, we know that there's risk, and we can define and count out the number of kids that are going to be moderate or high risk for return to school problems, then we have to come up with ways to figure out how we've done a good job or not with getting them back. Maybe that means that we look at their attendance after. Maybe that means that we look at their grades after. But frankly, if 74% of the time these guys are going to have some problems before they even get there, those may not be the best endpoints. So we got to think of other things, and we got to look outside ourselves, and we need partnership. We need partnership with school districts, we need partnership with special education directors, we need partnership with families to help lead us the right direction. I'm going to leave with one more piece. This is something that we wrote up a few months ago now and have published, that when we asked a bunch of doctors, what do we consider to be school success? The answer was family satisfaction. I hate that endpoint. I love that we do a good job with getting you guys satisfied with your care. That's great. I'd love 5 stars all the time. But that doesn't feel like a hard enough endpoint. That doesn't feel like we've defined a rigid and reproducible way to tell others that I'm doing a good job helping your kid. I want you to be happy with this. That's really important, but we need to do better than that. And we need to do better than that so that you're looking at your kid in school and saying, you know what? This is the best that we could do. This is the best that we could have an outcome so that they leave your house eventually. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if they moved out of your basement and didn't play Xbox all the time? That'd probably be a lot better. I'd love for them to go to school. I'd love for them to go to graduate school. I'd love for them to be sitting on the other side of this poster presenting someday about how important it is that their doctors thought about them getting forward. So that's my hope for your kid, and I hope that work like this is a pathway, a beginning, a step in the right direction towards trying to make those outcomes possible. And thanks for everything.